Okay, we have folks from all over the country who are joining us. This is wonderful. We are going to get started in just a moment as we have more people logging in and joining us. Okay, hello everyone, bonjour. Welcome to this webinar, which is on how to apply to the Healthy Communities Initiative. I'm joining you today from the unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. My name is Andrea Dix, and I am the president of Community Foundations of Canada, and we are one of the partners working alongside many others as part of the Healthy Communities Initiative. Now, before we start today's session, I wanted to go over a few technical and interpretation notes. First of all, it's lovely to have so many people with us. Welcome. It's nice to see you. I hope you're having an amazing day. So a Zoom reminder, you can see and hear us, but we can't see or hear you. If you have questions throughout the session, please pop them into the chat box. We have a wonderful team behind the scenes who is going to help to curate those questions for a Q&A later on if we have time, and that will help us to provide more information as we go. The session will be recorded and will be available to view on our website after the session. This session is also available in French and English. To access the French and English interpretation, you will see a globe at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you click on that globe, you can toggle between French and English. Our speakers will be speaking in a mixture of both French and English, so finding that little globe is a good idea right now. So today, we are excited to dive into the application process for the Healthy Communities Initiative. I know many of you were with us just 2 days ago when we announced this program, and we're delighted to see you back here today. The Healthy Communities Initiative is a vital step in our collective response to COVID-19. It will provide an opportunity to create the places and spaces communities need now, while strengthening our collective and individual belonging. We saw at the launch all of the amazing ideas that communities already have in their mind, and we're excited to see how these ideas will transform how we move, gather, and connect. In this session, we are going to look at how to transform these incredible ideas into applications. So you can see the agenda that is on your screen. We will be going through the eligibility criteria, looking at who can apply and what types of projects and expenses are eligible. Next, we will be looking at some key concepts that are important to your application, including the concepts of public space and community engagement. We will speak briefly about a couple of application process points, such as our regional models and permits and approvals. And last, we will do a brief walkthrough of what the application portal looks like so that you are well equipped in order to move forward with your application. At the end, as I said, we will have a question and answer period for as much time as we have possible together to round out the hour. So there is a lot to go through, so sit back, relax. It is recorded, as I said, so you don't have to take too many notes. And I think we're ready to dive in. Over the course of this webinar, you're going to meet a few different individuals who are part of the team bringing this forward. And we're going to start with Allison. Allison, over to you.
Thanks, Andrea. We'll start with a really quick overview of the Healthy Communities Initiative. Jacqueline, if you could just go ahead 2 slides, please. Thank you. So, what is the Healthy Communities Initiative? The Healthy Communities Initiative is a $31 million investment from the Government of Canada to support communities as they create and adapt public spaces to respond to the new realities of COVID-19. COVID-19 has seriously impacted our access and use of public spaces, and this is especially true in communities that are already experiencing vulnerability as a result of systemic inequalities. We've seen how organizations have shown creativity and resourcefulness in transforming public spaces, and this initiative will fund projects that allow people to connect and access public spaces safely while still respecting public health measures like social distancing and mask wearing. I'll talk a little bit about the partners that are working together on this initiative. So Community Foundations of Canada is working alongside the Canadian Urban Institute and other partners to roll out this initiative. These partners are experts in building vibrant, equitable, and livable public spaces and include the Canadian Urban Institute, 880 Cities, Park People, Vivronville, Mars, Canadian SED Network, ICLEI, and the National Association of Friendship Centers, J. Pitter Placemaking, and the Network for the Advancement of Black Communities. And I'm just going to check to see. Yes, okay, thanks, Jacqueline. Next slide. So who can apply? There is a broad pool of organizations who are eligible to apply for the Healthy Communities Initiative. You can see here these 4 groups who are eligible, and there are a lot of organizations under each of these groups. So I'll go through them really quickly. Municipalities or their agencies and or municipally owned corporations can include municipal governments and corporations, including water management, public transit, economic development, tourism agencies, etc. Indigenous governing bodies include a band council, First Nation, Inuit or Métis governments, and tribal councils. A provincial or territorial organization delivering municipal services include public utilities such as electricity, water, telecoms, and broadband, community health services, and economic development bodies. And then federal or provincially incorporated not-for-profits can include a long list of organizations such as business improvement areas or BIAs, registered charities, not-for-profits who are federally or provincially incorporated, universities and research institutes, Indigenous organizations and development corporations, and not-for-profit residents associations. There's more details available in the applicant guide on each of these groups. Community-led organizations or groups not listed as eligible can still apply indirectly by entering an intermediary relationship or by finding a collaborator on the project who is an eligible organization. We do have a template intermediary agreement that you can use, and our equity guidance has some tips on entering into partnerships using equity principles. So I'm going to speak a little bit about eligible projects. If your organization is eligible, there are 5 things your project has to show to be eligible. 1, it has to respond to identified needs arising from the impacts of COVID-19. So this initiative is a COVID-19 response and should address the impacts of the pandemic. The second item is that it needs to demonstrate it is used to create and adapt public spaces and programming and services for public spaces that are in the public interest. We'll talk a little more about this later, but your project needs to be in public space or accessible to the public. The third item is that your application will need to demonstrate consideration of and connections with the community. We'll also talk a little bit more about this later, but it's important that you engage your community in the project. The fourth, that it needs to serve the general public or a community disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. And 5, but I'll just quickly say that on number 4, your project should either serve the general public or a group who has been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. And then 5, lastly, it needs to fall within the 3 Healthy Community Initiatives theme areas. So there are what we call 3 themes of the Healthy Communities Initiative, and your project needs to be under at least one of these themes. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Michelle to talk through a little bit more about what those 3 themes are.
Thanks, Allison. So I want to give an overview of the 3 themes, and then on the next slide, we're going to take a deeper dive into what this could look like in terms of actual projects. So the first theme is safe and vibrant public spaces. Projects in this area will create and adapt public spaces or programming and services for public spaces to improve open spaces, parks, commercial main streets, and access to other amenities. These projects could adapt public spaces to help meet public health guidance, including social distancing. The second theme is improved mobility options. These projects could deliver a range of transportation and mobility options and make it easier to walk, bike, and access public transport. These projects could include projects that improve pedestrian and cyclist safety through roadway, sidewalk, or crosswalk improvements. The third theme is digital solutions. These projects will provide digital solutions that use data and technology in innovative ways to connect people and support healthy communities. These projects could use digital technologies and solutions to encourage citizen engagement, use of open data, online platforms, or physical digital devices for public benefit. Now let's look at some of these themes in terms of projects and what they could look like on the ground. So you'll see here many examples. Under safe and vibrant public spaces, potential projects include purchasing equipment for pop-up playgrounds to provide more outdoor options for children to play while maintaining social distance, designing and programming a community food garden to provide residents living on low income with healthier food options, creating mobile stalls for a night market festival in a public green space to allow businesses to operate safely outside. Under the improved mobility options, potential projects include opening streets for increased pedestrian zones and active transportation, purchasing equipment and materials necessary to create social distancing markings on sidewalks and crosswalks, purchasing bicycles for a bike share program for residents in a community to improve connections. Under the digital solutions theme, potential projects include developing a virtual platform to hold town meetings to engage residents in their municipalities, creating public Wi-Fi hotspots in parks, creating a lending library with public iPads or tablets available for seniors to help them get access to the internet. And these are just a few examples, but you can find many more in the applicant guide. And of course, you yourselves are going to be creative with all of your projects. The Healthy Communities Initiatives will be funding will provide projects with funding between $5,000 up to a maximum of $250,000. All budget items must be project related and eligible expenditures will vary depending on the project. We encourage you to look in depth at the applicant guide for a detailed list of eligible and ineligible expenses. Here are a few examples. Eligible costs include wages for additional staff, project materials, rent for the project, honoraria. This includes childcare costs, and reasonable administrative costs would be eligible. Some ineligible expenses include buying land, a building or a vehicle, costs that relate to other projects, board member salaries, and any expenses that occur after the end of the program date, which is June 30th, 2022. You'll need to detail your expenses on the budget section of the application, which you'll see later in this application. So now that we've looked at the eligibility, I'd like to pass this over to Melanie to talk through some key concepts for your application.
Awesome, thank you, Michelle. So in your application, your project must demonstrate two key concepts. So one, it's in a public space and for a public benefit. And two, you have demonstrated community engagement. So let's dive into these two further. So if we head to the next slide, thank you. So projects funded by the Healthy Communities Initiative must be in the local community's public interest by operating in a public space and for public benefit. You will hear me say that many, many times. So projects in public space take place in a space owned or operated by a municipality, the provincial or federal government. Think sidewalks, streets, parks, recreation centers, or non-commercial organizations. For example, a shared space within educational institutions or within Indigenous communities. So I'm going to build on what Michelle just shared with a couple more examples under the three themes. You could be erecting a seniors activity tent in a public park to transform space for socially distanced activities such as yoga classes or tea time. building separate trails alongside public rural roads to improve pedestrian safety and increase walkability. Or you could be developing a virtual platform to hold town meetings to engage all residents in their municipalities. So your project can target communities that are disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, such as senior citizens, but the project must still be publicly accessible. So for example, if you're looking at creating a project for seniors yoga in the park by erecting tents, that's a project that is targeting seniors, but others can participate as capacity allows. So we recommend reviewing the applicant guide for many, many more examples of eligible projects. So on the flip side of that, a project that is not accessible to the general public is ineligible. So think about that as our rule of thumb. If the public can't access it, it's ineligible. So a couple of examples that would be ineligible projects. If you're creating a green space on private property that is not accessible to the public, that's ineligible. Projects that take place indoors that are not accessible to the general public. For example, if you're looking to renovate staff space in an office to aid with social distancing, it's ineligible. So just to summarize that slide really quickly, we are looking for projects that are in a public space and for public benefit. So great applications show that the communities who this project is for believe in this project and are engaged. Applicants can demonstrate community engagement by seeking feedback from communities disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, including historically marginalized communities, but also residents, businesses, organizations, and other stakeholders in the project development and planning. Applicants can demonstrate engagement by hosting digital town halls, community consultation meetings, sending out surveys or other stakeholder discussions. Community engagement might be happening in the future, we want to hear about it, or reflect ongoing relationships you have. So for example, applicants can demonstrate their planned continued engagement with the community to receive feedback on the project. Applicants may also demonstrate their ongoing or previous relationships and consultations they conducted with the community on their engagement as part of their relationship building. We strongly, strongly encourage all of you to check out the optional equity guidance, which can be found on our website in the resource section for guiding questions on engaging with your community and embedding equity in the project design and implementation. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Claude to speak about 2 key considerations for the application process.
Merci beaucoup, Mel. Maintenant, je vais parler de quelques détails du processus de demande. Alors, on peut passer à la diapositive suivante.
Thank you very much, Mel. We'll move to the next slide. Thank you very much. And so the Healthy Communities Initiative uses a regional model, so we encourage you to consult the map on the website to see where your project will be held, and then to click the region where your project will be held. And so all projects will be reviewed by regional hubs, and projects requesting funding over 100,000 up to 250,000 will also be reviewed at the national level. Next slide, please. And based on your project, before receiving funding, you must provide evidence. You will be required to submit proof of necessary permits, permissions, or approvals before receiving funding. And for example, your local or regional authorities to determine which permits, permissions, or approvals you may require. And so you may consult your regional authorities to determine which permits and permissions or approvals may be required, as I mentioned. And receiving funding approval is a separate process to that of receiving any local permits, permissions, or approvals. And please note, and this is very important for those applications in Quebec, pursuant to the laws applicable in Quebec, any municipality or public organization that is selected for funding is subject to an act respecting the Ministère du Conseil Exécutif, and the applicants can submit their application without receiving authorization. However, they must receive an independent authorization prior to funding being released. Therefore, you do not need a permit or authorization to file an application with the initiative. However, you shall require it, you shall need it to obtain funding. At this point, I will now leave the floor to my colleague for the application portal.
Merci, Claude. In this section, we will go inside the application portal and see what the application looks like from your side as applicants.
Alors, on va se diriger vers le portail de demande en ligne.
In the first section of the application, there is an eligibility quiz. In this section, you will need to indicate what type of eligible organization you are, and you will choose what type of organization, and then a subcategory within that type. For example, you could choose that you are a federally or provincially incorporated not-for-profit, and as a subtype, you could choose registered charity. Once you pass the eligibility quiz, you will move on to the full application. On the left, once the eligibility quiz is complete, you'll see that you have access to the 5 sections of the application. In section 1, you'll provide some information about your organization, which will include the contact information for both yourself as an applicant and the organization, details on your organization's mission and mandate, details on how your organization will engage with the community, and how you will also indicate, and here you will also indicate whether you're applying as a single organization or in collaboration with others. In section 2 of the application, this is where you'll be given space to provide information about your project. In this section, we'll ask you for your project title and a description of the project. You'll also indicate which of the themes your project is focusing on. These are the ones you heard about earlier, and they're related to adapting public spaces, mobility, and digital solutions. In this section, there's also a few more questions, including how you've engaged the community in your project design and what your outreach plans are during the project, who will be leading the initiative, and what your project plan and timeline are. You'll also get the chance to let us know who your project serves. This might be the general public, or you may be targeting a specific population. For example, creating a pop-up playground in a park is specifically serving children. This question also has a section asking whether you have considered the permits you need for the project. And finally, in this section, you will also have the opportunity to upload any supporting documents you'd like to include about the project. In the next section of the application, in section 3, you'll be providing details about the location, budget, and timing. As Claude mentioned earlier, we're using a regional approach. So in this section, you will let us know which region or regions your project takes place in. For timing, you'll then need to indicate when your project starts and when it will finish. On the budget, there are a few questions, including how much funding you are requesting, and we will ask you to attach your budget. I'll now pass this over to Sally to go through the budget template and the rest of the application.
Merci, Alan. Je suis ravie d'être ici avec vous tous aujourd'hui et de vous présenter la suite de la demande. Commençons par les modèles de budget. Vous téléchargez les modèles de budget de notre site web ou bien de la demande
You can
elle-même.
download the budget template from the website, and you will see there are 2 areas representing both different models. And the first, you can use this one if your project will be entirely funded by this initiative. And the second model represents a more detailed budget, you may use this one if your project will be partially funded by this initiative and partially by other sources of funding. And of course, within your budget, you will list your planned budget and enter the various categories of expenses. So rental, equipment rental, salaries, and other such requirement. And in the yellow box on the screen, will provide a few general considerations on the equity for your budget. And of course, you may obtain more information on this on our website. And rest assured and make sure that the expenditure list is consistent with the amount that you've entered in the rest of your application. And the minute you have downloaded or you've uploaded the budget for your application, you can move to the next slide. Thank you. And this section is section 4 for authorizations and declarations. And you must tell us if your organization owes money to the Government of Canada or if your project will include someone who will act as someone who's likely to be in a conflict of interest. And in this section, thank you for confirming a few legal components and to declare that you are authorized to file this application. And at the bottom as well is the confirmation of the application. Next slide, please. Thank you. And section 5 is the very last section of the application. You're almost done. And in fact, this is a second confirmation for eligibility. In the first section that Alan showed us was a rather general confirmation. For this generation here, it must be done by the eligible organization. If you file your application within a partnership, if there's an organization that is not eligible, but the second organization is the eligible organization for this initiative, it has to be the second organization, the eligible one, that must complete this section. And to complete this section, you may provide a link towards a database to show that you are within a recognized field for municipalities that are incorporated, the incorporated First Nations or charitable organizations, or provide relevant documents to confirm your eligibility. For example, company corporate documents, financial statements, etc. And once you've downloaded or uploaded rather all of your documents, you can check off the box that this section is complete and you can file your application. Next slide, please. And of course, we understand that we have just provided a great deal of information, and we hope that this webinar was helpful for you. And we are aware that you're perhaps seeking further information. Our team wishes to provide as many resources as possible for you to complete your application. On the initiative's webpage, you'll find numerous resources that will be useful in order to also the application guide. These are your most important resources for the initiative. And on the website, you will find advice on equity, as many people have already mentioned, and this will provide information on equity, partnerships, and your budget. You'll also find a glossary with key definitions, as well as a video showing with screencasts exactly how to complete and to file your application. So if you missed anything in the explanation that Alan and myself have just presented, you can consult these videos in order to review the process. Currently, we are within the process of setting up a series of events referred to as community mobilization sessions, and these sessions will be held over the next few weeks, and our partners for these sessions will further address infrastructures led by the community and how to file funding applications. And we hope that these sessions will be helpful to you as well. And finally, if you still have questions, you may contact our support team at chchi communityfoundations.com. And so you have the website in French and in English as well as the link. We'll be happy to answer all of your questions. And thank you to all of you. And I will now leave the floor to Andrea for questions.
Merci, Sally.
Thank you,
Okay,
Sally.
that was a lot of information. And I know that there are many questions coming in. So we are going to do our best to address as many questions as possible. We will ask for those of you who are putting forward questions about a specific project and whether or not it would fit in a category or whether or not it would be eligible. We're not going to be able to get to those specific questions today. We're going to stick with more general questions about the program and about the process. However, as Sally mentioned, you can email our team and we will be happy to have conversations about your specific ideas. So to begin, I'll ask the team to jump in terms of who will answer these questions. So the first question, and I'm going to start with questions that have been asked by many individuals. Can you apply for more than one project?
I can jump in there. So
Thanks,
for round one, it is one application per organization. So we are limiting it. However, we do want to encourage collaboration at the community level. So you can only submit one application for your organization as the lead applicant, but you can partner with other organizations in your community for other projects where someone else is the lead applicant.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Mel. That answered another question as well at the same time. Good job. For clarity, you can continue to put your questions into the chat box in French or in English, and we will answer in the question in the language that it was asked. Okay, can multiple themes be applied to one project, or is it limited to one theme per project? Mel, do you want that one?
You can, we know that projects are complex and comprehensive, and so it's great if it fits multiple themes. But maybe I'll turn it over to Alan to talk about how that looks like in the application process for some specificity.
Sure. So as Mel mentioned, all applicants are able to select more than one project theme. The application form is going to ask to identify the primary one, if you will, but there is additional spots to indicate that you also support other theme areas.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Mel. In terms of timing, so there's two questions that have come up multiple times related to timing. So is retroactive funding eligible given the April 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2022 timeline?
Yeah, so, recognizing this as a COVID response funding, expenses are retroactive, but without a doubt, we're seeing these amazing projects come in the chat box. We know there's going to be a high demand for this funding. And so we just asked you to think about that in your application. But yes, expenses can be backdated.
Okay, Mel, maybe stay on the line because I think this one is one that you can also answer. And it's related to that. It's about ongoing projects. So can you just speak to the difference between ongoing projects and COVID response projects and maybe where there could be intersections or not?
Yeah, happy to. So, the mindset and the intention behind this funding is we're all living through COVID, communities are having to connect and gather, and some are in isolation because of it. So what can we do to bring communities and rethink our public spaces? So that's the framing. This is a COVID response funding. And so it's not meant for stabilization of a project. It's not meant for just ongoing operations. It's meant for projects that respond to a need in your community because of COVID.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Mel. Allison or Michelle, I'm going to ask you to weigh into this question. And it's a question that's looking for clarity around who the applicants can be, and more specifically, does it have to be a registered charity? I know the answer is no. So maybe you could just speak a little bit to who can apply.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
I'm going to jump in because I didn't see Allison turn on her camera. So many different organization types can apply. And then there is the collaboration and partnership model for those who are not necessarily listed as eligible. So as always, the best way to kind of do a double check is to look into our applicant guide and see the full listing there. However, municipalities are eligible, Indigenous government bodies are eligible, not-for-profits, charities, and I think there might be one more that I'm missing at the moment. So again, double check that applicant guide. But if you are not an eligible organization, you can collaborate with an eligible organization in order to advance your project. So that means that an organization, obviously not an individual, an organization would lead the project and you would be a collaborator as an organization type that is not eligible. And we have forms such as kind of in the application guide and an intermediary agreement form. So we can help you with that process if that is your organization type.
That's really helpful. Thanks for that, Michelle. And thanks for the reminder to all to look at the applicant guide. I know the team has put a lot of time and effort into creating that guide, and it should answer, I'm going to guess, 99% of the questions that people are going to have. Okay, perfect. I also want to remind everyone that this is being recorded. I see some more questions coming in asking about that. It is being recorded. The slides will be available, so no worries there whatsoever. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the reach of projects. And so there's a couple of questions that have come up related to the reach of projects. So the first one is, can a national charity, it could be a charity, or as Michelle pointed out, many different types of organizations, but are national charities eligible to submit multiple applications in support of initiatives in multiple regions? Mel, do you want this one?
Sure. So, we recognize that we have boundaries, but projects can cross boundaries and be moving across different provinces or regions. And so I did see a note that says you can't find a link to the map. We'll make sure that's updated in our materials after this. So you can look at the map and see what are the regions and who you're applying to. If your project is going to cross multiple regions, we have a separate stream for you to apply to, which will be adjudicated with other projects that cross multiple regions. So we've taken that consideration, and we have a pathway for you to apply.
Thanks, Mel. And just for clarification on that, that still means one application per applicant, correct?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Okay, I'm going to get into some specific questions, not specific about individual projects, but generally about some of the funding. So is there any requirement for matching funds for this funding?
There is no requirement for matching funds. There are limits to the funding that's here. It's between $5,000 to $250,000, and we know some projects take more money than that. And so if you have other partners to help fund your project, that's great. Let us know, but it is not a requirement.
Right. And just a follow-up question on that, Mel. The funding, folks can apply for the full project funding if it's within the range of $5,000 to $250,000.
Yeah, exactly.
Great, thank you. I know that often we get questions like this one, and so it's shown up a few times. And so I do want to spend just a few moments reflecting on it. And that's about the administration or the overhead expenses allowed in each project. So is there a cap on that particular budget line?
So for this one, I'll call on Alan. Maybe you can talk us through a little bit about the budget template and how we're asking for funding to be shown up in the projected budget plans.
Sure thing. So in the budget, as was mentioned, we have two templates. One's a more what we call the simple budget, and that's when your project is requesting all of its funds to run it through this Canada Healthy Communities Initiative. The second budget is for those more for those larger projects that will have multiple income sources, and so there isn't a set cap per se, but there is an itemization of the expenses, right? And so there is just, as with all processes, just considerations for the full project and how it will be administered.
Thanks for that, Alan. And as folks dig into the budget, if there are more specific questions, again, they can use the email and reach out to our team, who is happy to answer any questions. Okay, so a few more questions on funding. Will applications be reviewed on a first come, first served basis or reviewed after the application deadline?
So for this, for both rounds, it's not a first come, first served basis. It's a fixed deadline. And so on March 9th, I'm jumping ahead, on March 9th, applications are due. And then at that time, they will all be reviewed together.
Wonderful. And results will be communicated by April 15th as well, correct, Mel? That's another question. Great, great. And so just to follow on that, so March 9th is the deadline to apply for round 1. April 15th, all results will be communicated and funding will start to flow after April 15th, correct? Great, thank you. Is there a breakdown of the 31 million per priority? So that's the 3 priorities that have been identified.
Go for it, Michelle.
Yeah, give you a little break. There's not. We have not broken it down that way. We believe that you know your community's priorities, and we also have faith in the decision-making process that we'll find a balance that is appropriate for all the local communities. So again, as Alan mentioned earlier, some projects might touch on multiple themes, and that's okay. That's encouraged. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks for that, Michelle. There's another question related to funding breakdown that's showing up, and that is how is the funding being distributed across the country? So is there a breakdown by region?
So we want to make sure that wherever you're located in Canada, east, west, north, south, that you can apply for this. And so we have distributed an allocation to different regional hubs so that you can apply and that everyone genuinely has a shot at being successful. You know, as this program rolls out, if there's undersubscribed in areas or oversubscribed, I don't think we're going to see undersubscribed, but if it happens, then we will move money. But I would recommend you reach out to your community foundation via the map. You'll see who's participating to find out more information about what's available in your region.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Mel. So this is a great question. I think that we've answered it and alluded to it, but I want to touch on it again. And that is, would it be possible to get feedback on a couple of project ideas we have in mind before submitting? Mel, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, we're here to help. So, you know, help with your eligibility and to walk you through what would be deemed eligible versus ineligible. We won't be providing judgment on your applications. We want you to put your best foot forward, what you think is best for your community, but feel free to reach out to us. Our email's been posted in their link if you have any questions about the eligibility of your projects. And going with the one project per applicant. So I'll just reiterate that piece.
Yes, thank you for that, Mel. Okay, Alan, I am going to call on you for the next series of questions because they are related to the application portal. So the first is, will the application save progress if you're unable to submit when you start?
Definitely, yeah. So the portal does have autosave functionality. And so as you are typing, you can certainly, you know, start it and come back to it later. Additionally, we have a PDF version of it if you want to plan out your proposal before entering it online. That is also an option.
Thank you for that, Alan. And where would they find the PDF version?
So the PDF is available at along with all the other resources.
Okay, so on our website, wonderful.
Definitely.
One other question. Does the application portal allow for collaboration between organizations on one application?
Yeah, that's another great question. So within the portal, there is a functionality to add a collaborator. That's actually the name of the button you're looking for in there. So what you'll do is you'll enter the name, the email of the other party. They'll receive an invite into the system and have access to your shared application.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. Okay, we have a few more moments, so we'll keep going. So one of the topics that we touched on earlier was about community consultation and engaging the community in these solutions and innovations. So a question is, can the community consultation process be part of the funding project, or does it have to happen in advance and outside of the funding project?
Yeah, we recognize that for round one, the timeline is tight. And so if you will be, we want to see what your engagement plan is if it's not already underway. So in your application, detail out kind of what that looks like over the course of your planning and implementation in your application.
Okay. Thanks, Mel. Okay, this is a really important question that just has popped in. And it's looking for more information about round one and round two. And more specifically, it's asking, will round two only be the leftover funds from round one? So should you apply to round one? Or can you just speak a little bit, Mel, perhaps, and I know Claude touched on this as well, how round one and round two are operating the allocation of funds so that folks have a really good sense of that?
Yeah, we want to make sure that you have the chance, if you need more time beyond the March 9 deadline, to apply. So we have a second round to just allow groups to extend their collaborations, dig into some of the details in the planning. So we do have funds set aside for a second round. So don't worry if you don't apply to the first round. There is money available and ready to be spent in the second round. So that's okay to apply at that time.
Wonderful. Thanks for that, Mel. Another question about categorization within the rounds. And so there's a question about, are there categories of budgets that will be adjudicated together? So will a $5,000 application be adjudicated with a $250,000 application, or is there separate streams? Do you want to comment on that? Or who would like to comment on that?
I can take that one.
Okay.
So projects over 100,000 will be going to kind of like a separate review process. And so the projects that are between 5 to 100,000 will be adjudicated together. And the national kind of stream for those larger projects will be comparing those with one another.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Allison.
Also, those that select that they are working in many regions or more than one region, those will also be evaluated in a separate process.
Wonderful. Thanks, Michelle. On that, I wonder if we could just touch a little bit on who will be adjudicating the applications and how that review and evaluation will happen in the two different categories as well that have been identified.
Sure. So community foundations, our network of community foundations will be leading the charge on developing review committees. And these review committees will be in each region, and they will include local community foundations, so those who can provide some local knowledge and input and oversight. Subject matter experts who are professionals in dealing with the 3 theme areas, and also representatives from equity seeking groups that we're anticipating receiving applications from in those regions. And so that will be what the regional review process will be composed of. And then a similar type of composition will be used for that cross-regional bucket, and then the national bucket as well. For the larger projects of to 250,000. Those regional hub committees will be reviewing those projects as a first step to provide their local knowledge and recommendations to the national committee. And then the national committee will take in the guidance from the regions and the local adjudicators to make their decisions for the projects with the most merit from across the country.
Thanks for clarifying that, Allison. Okay, I want to go back to the question about submitting one project application. So Mel, I think maybe you're best positioned to answer this question, and it's sort of getting into it a little bit deeper. So can one organization apply for one project in round one and another one in round two?
So we'll provide another webinar in advance of round two. Don't worry about all the details coming into that one. So if you have a project that's ready, apply now. And if it's not accepted, if it's not successful in round one, you'll have an opportunity to apply again in round two.
Okay, you answered the second question as well, which was, just for clarity, if you are not successful in round one, can you adjust and reapply in the second round? And the answer is yes. Perfect. Okay, bear with me, folks. I'm just looking at all of the questions here and making sure that we're answering those that are asked most often. This is a question, we did touch on it, but I just want to get more specific. We answered about national projects, and this question is more about province-wide projects. So can this program support province-wide projects, or does it need to be more specific to the region?
Jump in on this one. So the best way of finding that out is kind of depending on your region. You would take a look at the map that we have provided, and we can link that again in the chat. And you'll see whether or not a hub for your region is provincial or is actually divided. So there may be many hubs in one province, or it might be a situation, if you're in Atlantic Canada, that you actually have one hub for many provinces. So it depends. If you are in a situation where your project is going to cover more than one hub, so again, take a look at the map and see where those lines are. And if it's more than one hub, then you would apply to, again, it's all built into the application form itself. You would just select the button that says, my project is taking place in many regions, and then it will be compared against others that are working in that same thing. If you are in a province where there is only one region, there's only one hub, then you would apply to that same hub.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Michelle.
And I'll just add for ease of, it's a beautiful map. There's colors, we're trying to make it really easy for you to say, hey, this is my project. This is where it's going to cover. Is it just singularly in one hub? Is it crossing multiple? So we try to make it as user-friendly and as fun and playful as possible to help you out.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, this is going to be the second to last question. And it is, will there be ongoing monitoring and reporting required once the project is completed and during?
So there will be at the end of the project, as you near the end and as you finish up, we want to hear how it went. We want to hear about what worked, what collaborations, some surprises, the stories, like we're hoping, like we want to capture the impact of the stories. So there will be a report to submit at the end. If, this is a COVID response measure, and we all are living under different public health orders. And so if there's kind of bumps along the road or something doesn't go as planned, reach out to your regional hub, reach out to CFC. We want to work with you to be in touch if plans aren't going as expected.
Thanks for that, Mel. Those are important stories that we want to be capturing. So as I said, that was the second to last question. And the last question is actually a question that we have for all of you. So first of all, thank you for your time today. You have asked incredible questions. I hope that this has provided you with great information to get your applications started and to get your creative juices flowing. If you have more questions, please reach out to our team. We've shared our email address with you in the chat box. We are here to answer your questions and to help you navigate the application process for your wonderful ideas. So our last question to you is via a poll that is going to pop up for you, just to tell us a little bit about how you received this information and whether or not it was helpful for you. So we'll ask you to do that. We look forward to conversations. We look forward to seeing your incredible ideas, and we wish you a wonderful day. On behalf of everyone in the partnership that is the Healthy Communities Initiative, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon.